She had been sleeping in the wagon for 3 weeks. He said the cabin had room for 2. The wagon was a Studebaker farm wagon, with a canvas cover that had a tear in it the size of a hand, and the tear let the rain in, and the rain came in at night when the rain was coldest, and when sleep was most needed, and the letting in was the problem. And the problem was one of many problems, and the many problems were the life of Calla Drennan, who was 26 years old, and who had been sleeping in the wagon for 3 weeks, because 3 weeks ago, the bank in Lander had foreclosed on her homestead, and the foreclosing had produced the eviction, and the eviction had produced the wagon. And the wagon was all that remained. The wagon, and the 2 mules, and a trunk of clothes, and a cook stove she could not use, because using a cook stove requires a floor, and the wagon did not have a floor. The wagon had a bed, and the bed was boards, and the boards were hard, and the hardness was the discomfort, and the discomfort was the life. She had parked the wagon on the public road outside of Sinks Canyon because the public road was the only place she could legally exist. Private land required permission, and permission required asking, and asking required the admission that she had nowhere to go, and the admission was the shame, and shame was the fence that kept Calla on the public road, sleeping in a wagon with a torn canvas cover in the Wind River country of Wyoming territory in October. October in the Wind River country is not a month for sleeping in wagons. October is the month when the temperature drops below freezing at night, and the frost comes, and the frost is the warning that says winter is coming, and winter in the Wind River country is not survivable in a wagon with a torn canvas cover, and the not survivable was the urgency, and the urgency was the clock, and the clock was ticking. Parnell Doss found her on a Thursday. He found her because he was riding the road from Lander to his cabin in the canyon, riding the way he rode every Thursday, which was the day he went to town for supplies, and the riding was the routine. And the routine was interrupted by the sight of a wagon parked on the road with smoke coming from a small fire beside it. The fire the evidence of habitation, and habitation on a public road in October was the anomaly, and anomalies are the things that make Parnell stop, because Parnell was the kind of man who stopped. He was 33 years old. He ran a small cattle operation in Sinks Canyon, 40 head on leased government land. The 40 head enough for a living and not enough for wealth, and the not enough for wealth was acceptable because wealth was not the goal. The goal was the living, and the living was the cabin, and the cattle and the canyon, and the particular solitude of a man who had come to Wyoming from Pennsylvania 12 years earlier, because Pennsylvania was too full of people, and Wyoming was not full of anything except space, and space was the thing Parnell needed, the way some men need company. He stopped his horse at the wagon. He saw Calla. She was sitting by the fire on an upturned bucket, wearing a coat that was adequate for September, but not for October. The not adequate, the evidence of a woman whose planning horizon had been shortened by crisis, because crisis shortens planning horizons the way a cliff shortens roads. Suddenly, without warning, and the suddenly was the foreclosure, and the foreclosure was the cliff. "You are living in this wagon," Parnell said. He said it as an observation, not a question, because the observation was sufficient. The fire and the bucket and the wagon and the coat said everything that a question would have asked. "I am living in this wagon." "How long?" 3 weeks. "The bank took my homestead. The homestead was all I had. The all I had is now the wagon, and the mules and the trunk and the fire." Parnell looked at the wagon. He looked at the canvas cover with the tear, and the boards that served as a bed, and the trunk that contained the clothes, and the absence of everything else. No stove inside, no lamp, no chair, no table, nothing except the minimum, and the minimum was less than the minimum, and less than the minimum was the destitution, and destitution in October in the Wind River country was the emergency. "My cabin is 3 miles up the canyon," Parnell said. "The cabin has room for 2. The room for 2 is not an invitation to anything except warmth and a roof that does not have a tear in it, and the warmth and the roof are the offer, and the offer is for as long as you need it." Calla looked at Parnell. She looked at him with the assessment that destitution teaches, the assessment that measures offers for danger, because destitution makes a person vulnerable, and vulnerability attracts predators, and predators disguise their predation as generosity, and the disguising is the trap, and traps are what Calla had learned to watch for. She looked for the trap. She did not find it. What she found was a man on a horse with supplies tied behind his saddle, and a face that was weathered and plain and honest, the honesty visible in the eyes, which were steady and which did not look away when she looked at them, and the not looking away is the tell of honest men, because dishonest men look away, because looking away is the instinct of concealment, and Parnell was not concealing. "I cannot pay," Calla said. "The cabin does not cost money. The cabin costs nothing, because the cabin is mine, and mine does not require payment from guests. And guests is what you would be. A guest in a cabin with a roof and a stove and walls that do not have tears in them." Calla accepted. The accepting was the hardest thing she had done since the foreclosure. Harder than sleeping on boards. Harder than the rain through the tear. Harder than the cold. Because accepting help is the act that admits you cannot manage alone, and admitting you cannot manage alone is the act that pride resists, and pride is strong, but pride is not stronger than October in the Wind River country, and October won. The mules knew the road was going uphill before Calla told them. The mules knew, because mules know terrain the way sailors know weather, instinctively, and the instinct said uphill, and uphill was the direction of Parnell's cabin, and uphill was the effort, and the effort was the last effort Calla had in her. The last reserve of the energy that 3 weeks of wagon sleeping had nearly depleted, because depletion is what happens when you pour out effort every day and nothing pours back in, and nothing had been poured back into Calla for 3 weeks, until Parnell poured the offer, and the offer was the refilling. She drove the wagon up the canyon. She drove it behind Parnell's horse, the driving a following, the following a trust, the trust preliminary and fragile, and based on nothing except the steadiness of his eyes and the absence of the trap. And the absence was sufficient, because sufficiency is the standard of the desperate, and Calla was desperate. The cabin was small and solid. It was built of logs, lodgepole pine. The logs fitted tightly and chinked with mud and moss, the chinking the insulation, and the insulation was the warmth, and the warmth was the first thing Calla felt when she entered, the warmth of a stove that had been banked that morning and that still held heat, the holding heat the evidence of a well-built cabin, and well-built was what Parnell's cabin was because Parnell built things the way he did everything, carefully, with the patience that adequate results require. There were 2 rooms. The main room had the stove and a table and 2 chairs and a shelf of supplies, and the back room had a bed and a window, and Parnell gave Calla the back room because giving the back room was the courtesy of a man who understood that a woman alone in a stranger's cabin needs the room with the door, and the door was the safety, and safety was the gift. Parnell slept in the main room. He slept on a pallet by the stove, and the sleeping by the stove was the arrangement, and the arrangement was clear, and the clear was the respect that does not need to be spoken, because the arrangement speaks it. Separate rooms, separate spaces, the separation, the boundary that says, I am offering shelter, not proximity, and shelter is enough. Calla cooked. She cooked because cooking was the thing she could offer in exchange for the room, and the offering was the reciprocity that makes the accepting easier, because reciprocity converts charity into exchange, and exchange preserves dignity, and dignity is the thing that destitution threatens and that Calla was determined to keep. She cooked well. She cooked the way a woman cooks who has cooked on a homestead for 4 years, with the economy of ingredients that frontier life requires, and the skill that economy produces, because economy forces creativity, and creativity produces flavor. And flavor was the thing Parnell had not had in his cabin since he built it, because Parnell cooked for sustenance, and Calla cooked for nourishment, and the difference between sustenance and nourishment is the difference between survival and living was what Calla brought to the cabin. Parnell noticed the cooking. He noticed it the way a man notices warmth after cold, with the particular awareness that deprivation produces, the awareness that says this is different, this is better, and better is the thing I did not know I was missing until it arrived. He ate the meals and the meals changed the cabin. because a cabin in which good meals are cooked is a different cabin from a cabin in which adequate meals are tolerated. And the difference is the warmth, not the stove warmth, but the human warmth, the warmth that a shared meal produces. He noticed other things. He noticed that Calla swept the cabin floor every morning. He noticed that she organized the supply shelf by type and by frequency of use. The organizing a system, the evidence of a mind that imposes order on chaos, and the imposing was the competence, and the competence was attractive. Attractive not in the physical sense, but in the gravitational sense, the sense in which competent things draw other things toward them, the way a well-built structure draws admiration. He noticed that she talked to the mules. She talked to them the way a person talks to companions. Not baby talk, not commands, but conversation. The conversation of a woman who had spent 3 weeks with no company except 2 mules, and who had formed the bond that solitude produces between a person and the animals that share the solitude. Winter came. The winter was the Wind River winter, severe, white, cold in a way that is not merely temperature but presence. The cold, a physical thing that occupies the air and the ground and the walls of a cabin, and that can only be resisted by fire and insulation and the warmth of another person's company. And the company was Calla and Parnell, and the company was the resistance. One evening in December, Parnell came in from checking the cattle and found Calla reading by the stove. She was reading a book he kept on the shelf, a worn copy of Emerson's essays that his mother had given him when he left Pennsylvania, and the reading was quiet, and the quiet was beautiful, and beautiful was the word that entered Parnell's mind without permission. The way weather enters a canyon without permission, and the entering was the recognition that the cabin with Calla in it was a different cabin from the cabin without her, and the different was the better, and the better was the feeling, and the feeling was the thing Parnell was not ready to name, but that was naming itself. They talked in the evenings by the stove, the talking, the getting to know, that happens when 2 people are confined by winter and by proximity, the proximity producing conversation, the way pressure produces diamonds, slowly, under force, and the force was the winter, and the diamonds were the stories they told each other. Calla told Parnell about the homestead. She told him about the 4 years of work, the plowing, the planting, the building, the daily labor of a woman alone on 160 acres in the Wind River country, the aloneness, the difficulty, and the aloneness the pride, because doing it alone was the proof, and the proof was the homestead, and the homestead was gone, and the goneness was the grief, and the grief was spoken for the first time in Parnell's cabin, spoken to a man who listened without interruption, because listening without interruption is the gift that good listeners give, and Parnell was a good listener. Parnell told Calla about Pennsylvania. He told her about the family he had left, the parents and the brothers and the sisters, and the farm that was too small for all of them, and that had produced the leaving that brought him to Wyoming, and the Wyoming that had become home, because home is the place where you stop, and Parnell had stopped in Sinks Canyon, because the canyon was beautiful, and the beauty was the reason, and reasons do not need to be more complicated than beauty. Spring came in April. The snow melted and the canyon greened, and the road opened, and the opening was the question that the winter had deferred, the question that spring insists upon, which is, what now? The road is open, Parnell said. The road is open. You can go if you want to go. The wagon is where you left it. The mules are fed. The road goes to Lander, and Lander goes to everywhere, and everywhere is available. Do you want me to go? Parnell was quiet. The quiet was the thinking of a man who is about to say the truth, and who is measuring the truth against the consequences. And the consequences are the risk, and the risk is rejection, and rejection is the thing that quiet men fear most, because quiet men do not recover from rejection quickly. They carry it the way they carry everything, silently, and for a long time. I do not want you to go. I want you to stay. The wanting is not the cabin or the cooking or the sweeping. The wanting is you, the person who talked to mules and organized the shelf and cooked meals that were not sustenance, but nourishment. And the nourishment is the thing I need. and the needing is the wanting, and the wanting is the truth. Calla sat at the table. She sat in the chair that had been her chair for 6 months, the chair that had become hers through use, the way rooms become yours through habitation, and places become yours through staying. "I will stay," Calla said. "I will stay because the staying is the thing I want, and wanting to stay is different from needing to stay, and the difference is the choice, and the choice is mine, and I choose this cabin, and this canyon, and this man who offered a room when I was sleeping in a wagon with a torn canvas cover in October. And the offering was the kindness, and the kindness became the home, and the home became the love, and the love was the thing that neither of them had planned for, and that both of them had needed, and the needing was the finding, and the finding was the staying, and the staying was forever."